Work. Yeah, well, now let's hear, Ludovic, if I lived up to your expectations when you supported my candidacy for the steering board. Yeah, I'm very glad that I have the opportunity to tell a bit more about what we are doing, what CoARA stands for, and where we stand nowadays. I have a presentation on that. Normally, I have to be also very careful of what I'm saying, but this afternoon I have to be even more careful because one of my colleagues in the steering board of CoARA is sitting in front row, Stacek Kistin. He's also a panelist, so we have to be very careful of what I'm going to say. So it's a broad overview of what we are, where we stand for, what we do, and indeed where we stand currently. Some years ago, and Ludovic alluded already to that, there was a broad consensus coming up that we really had to do something about the existing ways of assessing research. Although there are still pockets of resistance, but I think in large parts of the world and large part of the academic world, we see that we saw that we really had to organize some change in what we do, and especially to make sure in general that we have a more healthy research environment, research culture, but also making sure that we have a, let's say, situation where research and publications are more affordable. This is the broader idea behind this, and of course it was already started. It started already with the DORA declaration in 2012, but mostly, and think a very important role there for the European Commission as well. This idea was, signing all these agreements and all these things is very irrelevant, but we really have to do something. Huh? So the European Commission was very supportive in really getting things into action. So that was indeed the intention behind creating ARA, the agreement, and setting up the Coalition for Advancing Research Assessment. So it's about the agreement that's there, shared direction for changes in assessment, and the overarching goal is, of course, maximizing the quality and impact of the research. And this is the key of what we want to do and have to do, and of course that's also we have to put these things in action ourselves. Huh? What we see nowadays is indeed that we have a lot of signatories, 899 already. It's increased tremendously over the last couple of years, and we have 773 members currently. The thing is, of course, that we really want to do something. People, institutions that enter into that agreement or want to participate into CoARA, they really have to commit themselves to actively drive the reform in research assessment. So, as I said many times before, action, and I will tell a bit more about the actions later on. But first of all, I have to say something about what is the action all about. What is the direction of the actions? And we, within CoARA, we have what we call the 10 commitments, not the 10 commandments, although they have some biblical, let's say, meaning as well, at least in our arrangement. And there are, in these 10 commitments, there are the 4 ones who really are at the heart of what we have to do and want to do. First of all, of course, they recognize the diversity of contributions of people in careers. And not counting beans, and not counting the metrics, and not only counting the metrics. I think 3 weeks ago I was in a meeting in Budapest, where there was the meeting of all the academies of arts and sciences in Europe. And there was also a discussion going on. I was also asked to deliver a brief talk there. And there were people telling a lot of things about the legitimacy of universities. How can we make sure that politics and also society really wants to spend a lot of money for these public institutions as universities? And really, how do we organize understanding about what we do? Yeah, well, and the conclusion was quite clear by a lot of people in the room. Yeah, it's not helpful if we keep on publishing things and we don't have people in place that really are helpful in translating what we are doing to what's happening in politics and making sure that politics is also evidence-based and evidence-informed. So we need to have or find ourselves some, let's say, policy brokers, or science brokers to policy. Yeah, and how do you get them? And how do you make sure that these people are really willing to do the things that we want them to do in organizing better legitimacy? And immediately we said, yeah, well, of course, you have to not only find these people and train these people, but you have to recognize their value for what we are doing in academia, and you have to reward them accordingly, also in sense of making career in academia. And there are so many other elements when it comes to public engagement, I think, that are really relevant for what we are doing or should be doing as universities. And there are a lot of people involved in a university doing that type of work. So, yeah, you would not only have to find them, but you have to see them. And you have to reward them for what they are doing, because they give an essential contribution to what we are doing and are supposed to be doing as a university. And the same goes for education. Sacek and I had a brief conversation over lunch about, let's say, the relevance of education. And to a certain extent, it's a bit of a pity that education is not explicitly there in the ARA. Because, yeah, well, when it comes to the essence of a university and making sure that our knowledge gets to the younger generations and then they become relevant for whatever things are happening in society, education is key, of course. That's the main thing of making an impact in society and for society. So when it comes to assessing these careers and making it possible for people to make a career, education is also a very important element in what we intend to do and want to do. What is very important, and of course that's many people think about this endeavor, especially about these things like metrics. We know for sure that a lot of these metrics are flawed. And that does not imply that we as an organization, as ARA, are completely against metrics. Metrics can be very helpful. But yeah, we have to make sure that these are the right metrics, and that you make a sensible use of them, appropriate use of these metrics. So be very careful what you're doing, and don't step in the line of, let's say, your predecessors and, yeah, well, make, for instance, the H index the holy grail for each and every career. That's one of the things. A very difficult one, also a brief discussion I had with another colleague from Portugal over lunch on that issue. That is the issue of the rankings. I hope that for each and every one it is clear that rankings should not be used in assessing individual careers. There I am. But what we still see is that rankings are seen to be very important for each and every university to establish, yeah, well, the quality of a university. But does it really work that way? And we see that there are several, let's say, negative aspects on these rankings. For instance, the thing that these rankings imply the idea that, yeah, we as universities are largely comparable, and that all our activities can end up in one figure and one number, simply forgetting that we have a place in society, have a responsibility in society, and that might differ from country to country, even from region to region, where your university has to work on, has to stand for. And in many cases, these rankings can really stand in the way in fulfilling your own obligations towards society, your own environment, but also your own strategy that works accordingly. So if these rankings are to the detriment of your own strategy, yeah, why should they use it? Should you use them? And there was a wonderful piece a couple of weeks ago in the Cape Times, Cape Town, South Africa, for a colleague of ours, that she wrote a wonderful piece on what's now what's going on in these commercial league table rankings. They're now looking for other, let's say, markets, and going, for instance, for the African countries. And she really warned their colleagues, but please don't enter into that system, because you simply will not work to the benefit of your own society. So beware for what you're doing. And you know for sure that some universities, some interesting universities like Sorbonne, Zurich, and the university where yours truly still works, well, except just simply we don't deliver the data anymore to these rankings. So we have to really be careful about that, and of course sometimes we cannot afford to leave the rankings. There are some countries, I know for sure, that, let's say, the governmental funding is completely based on the rankings. If you improve your position on the rankings, then you get more money. So it's not easy for these universities to say, okay, we step out and we simply don't participate anymore. But we really have to be very careful about what we are doing in that area. And if you, that's the main thing I want to say. Then there are some other, let's say, elements there that are also very important. The 6 other commitments. I will not read them aloud. You can see them for yourselves. But of course, there is a true commitment to do something. To organize other means and ways of reviewing, coming up with new assessment criteria, tools, and processes, for instance. And make sure that you evaluate, like we always have to do as universities, when it comes to innovating things and making sure that things are really working. Yeah, well, as I said before, if you enter into the ARA and into CoARA, then you really have to do something. You have to come up with an action plan within a year. And you have to tell the organization, what are you going to do in your institution with regard to these 10 commitments? How do you going to implement them? You really have to think about it. And well, up until now, 1/3 of the people, the institutions that entered CoARA came up with an action plan. So 2/3 to go. Is it a good news or is it bad news? Yeah, well, there is room for improvement, I would say. And of course, we ask a lot of our participants, also especially the people who are doing work in our working groups, which I'll tell a bit later on, more about later on. So what's going on there in your university? And what we see in many cases, that people who are really working on these CoARA commitments within their universities, they feel a lack of leadership. A true commitment of the leadership in their university. What we sometimes see is that when there is an election for the new rector, then after the election the commitment disappears. And then I wonder what's going on there. Is that a personal commitment by the rector? Or is it an institutional commitment? And I would say if you sign an agreement for your university, then it has to be an institutional commitment. And then an important element is that, of course, that if you really want to live up to the expectations and to these commitments, of course, then the people who are dedicated in your university or sometimes appointed or assigned to do the job and to implement all these things, yeah, you have to give them room. You give them time to do these things. One of the things that we concluded also in our steering board, and I have one person in the room that can testify to that, is that we said we have to set ourselves up a task force. We already organized it now, and to make sure that we address the leadership of university networks, within university networks, and really tell them what these commitments imply. And there's a need for action. And that leadership is indeed a very important thing here. And as we also discussed over lunch, I heard a wonderful metaphor from a Brazilian colleague of mine a couple of weeks ago. Said, leadership should be like a virus. You make sure that each and every gets the virus and really wants to do something about that. So action is really needed, and it's quite difficult, I think. But there is no excuse anymore, because let I turn to that. We have a lot of working groups that really have come up with wonderful practical material. So you can see in some cases that you say, well, how do we change this research assessment? What do we do in our institutions? How do we reform things? Yeah, well, we have organized ourselves a lot of working groups, and you see them on the screen, that are really working on these several elements. And what for us is also very important that last summer, this summer I must say, we came to the conclusion in the General Assembly on how we endorse as CoARA these outputs of these working groups. There's an endorsement framework now there. And the working groups come all kinds of practical proposals, come up with tools, come up with instruments. They go into an endorsement procedure, and then they're out in the open. And I think that these elements are very helpful, or these can be very helpful to really put, let's say, the words into action. And that's a very important step we are taking, and that's really the things that we want to do. What we see currently, and you see it on the screen, is that CoARA is an organization that is working worldwide. We have membership in Canada, Latin America, Australia, in Africa. But of course, what you see also on the screen is that, well, a lot of effort goes into the European thing. And the European countries are quite leading in many cases. Although very interesting things come from Canada, especially the French-speaking part of Canada. I admit to say, I have to say here as well, there are wonderful, let's say, proposals coming out there. And what we see is that more and more we try to connect the networks of people working on an international level on these kinds of changes. You have DORA, as I said before, but now quite recently also the Barcelona Declaration, and also in specific areas you have other, let's say, people working on elements of what we could call the broader movement in open science. But I think that the really added value of CoARA indeed is and can be that we really come up with all kinds of practical tools and instruments for helping people to organize the change that is really needed. And the outputs are there, and what's wonderful is indeed that they're now in part and parcel of an endorsement framework, and they are published and going to be published in the coming months. So there's a lot of, let's say, work already being done, a lot of work also already being approved, and what we see is that now a lot of issues, a lot of, let's say, findings, contributions can be published. So you can find a lot of material on our website and can see if it works for you and if you could use these kind of elements. But also, I think interesting to see, the working groups up until now were very important for us. That was, let's say, a very important element of putting, let's say, the plans into action. And in these working groups, people from all kinds of countries work together. So we get a lot of input from all kinds of countries in these working groups. But we came to the conclusion that it's equally important to invest more time and effort in setting up national chapters within the framework of CoARA. And you see the development there in only 2 years, a lot of extra national chapters. And these national chapters are very relevant when it comes to, let's say, the getting to know better what's happening in a country, what are the real boundaries, the drawbacks, the things that you have to overcome, the issues that you have to deal with. They are, in many countries, also a driving force for change in a country. So the national chapters have become more and more important also in our work, and they're really accelerating some of the things that we really want to do. So, and now there are also a lot of new applications pending for new national chapters. They have to be approved by the steering board, of course, before they can qualify themselves as a CoARA chapter. But I think that these are very helpful in what we are bringing and what we're changing. What's also interesting, at least for some people, is indeed that there is also money set aside. There's funding possible for people who really want to have support for institutional change. And in the coming years, we will see that also the European Commission will set money aside to make sure that also more practical things can be organized. If there are still gaps in, let's say, all these commitments, we can hire and invite experts to do the real work. So I think that for us it's quite clear and I'll tell a bit more about later on about that, that the European Commission is really behind this movement and really wants to support it in any way it can. And we keep on saying, yeah, that's very important that we in Europe do these things and that the European Commission wants to contribute, but make sure that it stays and becomes more and more also an international, global affair. Huh? Because although we have some, let's say, reluctance when it comes to working with some, let's say, US colleagues nowadays, or people in other parts of the world, but we know for sure that research, quality research and education really thrives on international collaboration. So we have to make sure that we are on the same level, speak the same language as colleagues in other parts of the world, and not only within Europe. But yeah, we have to make sure that we find some kind of a balance in these types of activities. This is more tactical. I'll leave it to that. For us, it's also important that we indeed started with that endorsement framework, and we released the first enhanced version of the CoARA toolbox. So, in fact, for the leadership and for other people in the university, there is no excuse anymore. Huh? The help is there. The instruments are there. You can do the things if you really are committed to making change in research assessment. We see that more and more in all kinds of European and other documents worldwide, this policy is embraced and things are going to be done. But also on a practical level, and I'm sure that many of you have noticed it, the European Research Council came to the conclusion, okay, that we have to do things differently in our research assessment. And of course, it's still about excellence, but yeah, excellence is such a, a hurrah word. It's a great. But how do you load that term? What does it really imply? How do you define excellence? Is it by the old-fashioned way of bean counting and metrics, or do you use other ways and means? And one of the things, of course, and very familiar to a lot of people, is the way how CVs are built and judged, also within the ERC. And there was a lot of buzz about the term narrative CVs. And some people were completely against this type of CV, such as, this will be fairy tales, fancy things, telling all kinds of nice things about yourselves, and nothing substantive there to really do something with it. But of course, what we see nowadays, it's we are not against metrics. Use them sensible. If you organize yourselves evidence through to metrics, it can be helpful, but make sure that the narrative is there as well. It is about also a qualitative approach, and what we see still, there's some. We are amongst us, although it is live streamed as well. Metrics is in many cases, in my view, a form of lazy thinking. Lazy thinking. So the numbers are there. Okay, this must be good. But the real story about what is it real quality? Did it really make a change? New approaches, new avenues in what we are doing, new theories or whatever. Does it has this work really contributed to let's say the large body of knowledge? You really have to be able to talk about that, and you have to make sure that you have the time to find the time to talk about that kind of thing. I think in essence we are all about quality. We really want to see things change. We really want to see improvement in all kinds of areas, new knowledge, etc. So you really have to find words to talk about that type of quality without sticking yourself into all these metrics. And as a rector, I've been the rector for 7 years of Utrecht University. I stepped down in March. Well, we have all these international assessment committees, and they work nowadays on an assessment protocol, a Dutch national assessment protocol, the strategy evaluation protocol, and it says, yeah, well, metrics can be there, but yeah, well, you have to have a narrative. You have to decide on the 5 most important publications, and you tell the rest of the world, and you have to tell the committee why these are so important. And then you come to the thing that some international colleagues in these commissions said, well, do I really have to read these things? Huh? So they were there for an easy job. Yeah, well, that's the story. So really find ways to talk about the quality of things. Yeah, well, this is, I think, a very important element in what's going on also in the ERC. And of course, it's still about real quality. It is about groundbreaking nature, ambition, feasibility. But it's not about, not anymore at least, about the numerical score of the PI. Huh? A very important element, I think, I would like to add to what I already said, was that, well, there are some new developments when it comes to, well, the new drivers for changing the way how we look at these, the quality of research. You are familiar with this Draghi report, very small report, hardly any text in it, but you will. But key in what now the agenda of the European Commission is. And the ERA, the European Research Area, is a very important element in what is going on currently. And also in Draghi and in other is this idea that policy harmonization is key for success. And the reform of research assessment is a key pillar, will be a key pillar of the new ERA framework as a precondition for research excellence. And we are now talking about the 5th freedom. Probably you're all familiar with that. The 5th freedom is the free movement of research, innovation, and knowledge. And that is only possible if differences in the research assessment system per country are minimized. Of course, there will always be, let's say, differences and national cultures and these kind of things. But if you really want to organize a free movement and equality in the movement, then you really have to make sure that you are talking the same language, looking at the quality of people in the same way. And increase of budget is, of course, wonderful, but it gives some room for the new developments, but these are the key drivers. And 2 slides left, Ludovic. Key elements of ERA are there on the screen, but I think that and of course the investment target is there for each and every country. Wonderful for each and every country who really wants to live up that standard. But I think that CoARA and ARA is a very important element. And if I'm not wrong, the ERA consultation, the act of the constitution, the consultation on the act is still open. So if you have any ideas on the ERA Act, please go to the website, fill in the forms. I have to say this on behalf of members of the European Commission, sponsored by the European Commission. Then the final slides. This will be there in December 2025. So this coming month, we opened up a digital library. And if you go to our website, you will find everything there. Hopefully very clear, transparent, very accessible for what we have been developing up until now. And it's indeed the material that should be helpful in organizing the research assessment in each and everyone's environment. And hopefully, Stacek, this was okay. Thank you very much for all your attention.
Thank you for your talk. Now, a lot of things are more clear to me, but there is something that, sorry for my ignorance, but you have been talking about universities a lot. And what about research centers? I hope that you have research centers.
Yeah, I did not mention it explicitly, but what we see, sorry, all kinds of nice people in what we have also in our membership. It's not only about universities. 60% of our membership is university, but we have also all kinds of research centers, research structures, etc., also becoming more and more a member of our organization. And even, I dare to say that also in this environment, even a lot of, let's say, academies of arts and sciences are participating in the CoARA endeavor. And as you probably know, the academies of arts and sciences are not known as the most progressive parts in research in general, but they're really thinking about in working on that as well. Hopefully this is answering your question. Yeah? Okay, thank you.
It's not done. Is it? Oh, yeah, it is. So here.
My question is to what extent we are closer to building kind of framework of the future system of assessment, because the big number of Polish universities which access the CoARA coalition is based on importance of evaluation for Polish universities, because in our case the evaluation decides about important academic rights, like right to promote doctors, to run doctoral schools, to be independent in running educational programs, but also in the distribution of money. This is one of the basic factors of allocation of money. For this, we need a kind of objective system, but different from this based on points for publications. But it should be objective, because otherwise our politicians will distribute money based on political criteria, not on the meritocratic criteria. So, this is the reason of my question. To what extent we are closer to building a kind of vision? Because to say we have to base on peer review or qualitative assessment is not enough. In a situation where we have, for example, more than 100 academic higher educational institutions, yes, and plus some professionally oriented, I could imagine that the challenge of building a kind of peer review qualitative system would be so high that I question myself to what extent it is feasible. And the hopes of our universities were that perhaps, we know, we also discuss among ourselves, but that there will be a kind of international support, clever people who tell us more about where we should strive. And perhaps we can find a kind of new innovations, yes, in the area of assessment, which will be which will help us to solve this problem, because we would not like to resign from a kind of objective base of allocation of distribution of money for higher education system.
But that was a very long question.
Yeah, but
we'll have a very short.
The answer is yes.
It was question and a reason. Yes, the question is quite simple: where we are, yes, and how to what extent we are closer to building a kind of ideal system.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm not sure how the future will look like, but I know two or three things for sure. One, we will never have a world code chiseled in marble, brought up to some mountain somewhere for eternity, because that's the nature of what research is and what science is. It's always will be dynamic, and ideas about what quality will change over time. But I do also know for sure that we getting closer and closer in the direction of, let's say, a more common understanding how we should change these research assessment. And there is for the European Commission also, and also I think certain members of the European Commission, a real driving force behind it. If you look at what's happening in the European research area, if you really take into mind these geopolitical issues that we now today have, and you really want to organize all force within the European Union, then you have to come up with a common understanding how you deal with quality. And what we see currently still is a movement from Eastern Europe to the Nordic countries, to southern countries, to the so that's simply not helpful. If you want to really organize, let's say, and find all the sources of potential quality in entire Europe, then you have organize some sort of common understanding of how we look at quality. So I think there's also from a policy point of view, well, there's a real driving force behind that. So I'm very optimistic that we're making big steps in that direction, and I'm very sure that it will not be a system based on fancy stories and fairy tales. So the hard science is there as well. But how the future looks like, I surely would have wanted to know that. Huh?
Good.
But would be a lot of money involved then. You know.
I have a very short question that will be the last one. That's my little privilege.
That's a chair, yeah.
What happens to the signatories that have not submitted their work plan within a year?
Yeah, well...
You have not yet decided.
We all herd them together on an open marketplace, and then we'll get a very fierce talk from the chair or a member of the steering board. No, what we intend to do, and as I said that before, a little bit, we really want to talk to the networks with leaders. Coimbra is also a very important element. We're going to talk about later this afternoon also about the universities, European universities. Say, okay, but there has to be done something. And of course, if they, some universities will not live up to that. Well, we're not there yet that we sanction them, because we're a very positive movement. But something has to be done there. Yeah. Okay.
Fine. Because actually, this is the case of my own university.
Ludovic, I have to talk to you about that. And,
yeah. Thank you very much, Henk. A big applause to Henk. And I'm very happy now to introduce Professor Agnès Guiderdoni, who is the Vice Rector, Pro-Rector, if we use the local wording, for research here at UCLouvain. Agnès, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me well? Okay. Thank you very much. So for a change, I will not have any PowerPoint presentation, so a bit of diversity. So I'm particularly pleased that UCLouvain is hosting today's STEM working group event of the Coimbra network. So from the moment I discovered the Coalition for Advancing Research Assessment at the beginning of my mandate as Pro-Rector for Research a year ago, so in September 2024, so a bit more than a year ago, I have been enthusiastic about it. And I was very grateful to my predecessor for signing the agreement in October 2023. So 2 years ago. But I have some good news. The fact that this agreement exists gave me, as Pro-Rector, the legitimate track to build upon, and saved me a considerable amount of time, because I could rely on an international, already concerted undertaking. It contained the vision that I meant to implement during my mandate, and now the implementation has become the backbone of the new research policy for the next 4 years. Since 2023, so when we signed the agreement, We've been working with many stakeholders inside and outside the university to devise our action plan, which I have the contentment to say has been published just this week. Published on the Zenodo platform of the CoARA website. So it took us 2 years to achieve it, because it started with an ambitious plan, supported, so supported meaning funded, by our government, our Francophone government, the Fédération Wallonie-Bruxelles. This project meant to join the forces of the 5 universities located in the Francophone part of Belgium. So I'm not going to give you a lesson about the political structure and organization of Belgium, but there is a Francophone part in the South Belgium, and with a proper government. So and a proper organization of the higher education as well, independent from northern Belgium, from the Flemish part. So this project joined the forces of the 5 universities. And each of them leading a work package on a specific topic addressing an aspect of the CoARA agreement. So work package 1, which was led by UCLouvain, was on practices in evaluation research, so really the core of the agreement. A second work package was on open science, a third one on ethics, a fourth on scientific integrity, and a fifth on supporting, or the support that we can bring to the researchers through training courses, and also a support to career development. This led to the opening of a platform hosted on the website of the CREF, which is the Council of the Francophone Rectors, a platform of shared practices, information, and resources. So in the context of today's event, during which we will reflect on the role of networks in the implementation of the reform, it is meaningful that in order to lay the foundation of this reform here in Belgium, so at least, again, in the Francophone part of Belgium, we've been developing an inter-university project, and maybe more importantly, that even after the end of the project, because the project was ended last year, so even after the end of this funded project, each university has committed, one way or the other, to continue the work undertaken during the project itself. So this platform is called Pindar, which is the name of a classical Greek poet, by the way. But this is here the acronym for Plateforme interuniversitaire d'accompagnement de la recherche, or Inter-University Platform for Research Support. This platform is the most durable and concrete platform of this continued collaboration. So indeed, I'm deeply convinced that the reform will only be fully successful if we make the progress all together, not only at a national level, but crucially at an international level. Because research evaluation, as you know, is international most of the time, and we need to work on the same or with the same criteria to have equitable practices and bring the best of this reform to all our researchers. And this is something that Henk had said in his talk. So the best of this reform. So what is the best of this reform, you may ask? As I said, from the outset, I have been enthusiastic about this proposition made to universities to evolve their evaluation practices, and in doing so, to fit more closely the aspirations and constraints, both of senior and junior generations of researchers, as well as to address the new issues and requirements they are facing, that our societies are facing as a whole. So what can we gain? So I'm going to give some of the gains that I have identified, but the list is not exhaustive, of course. But if we try to synthesize a bit, I found 4 main benefits. So first of all, it will impact all aspects of the research job. And in fact, it will go beyond the research part of the job. So the HR, the human resource dimension, is also crucial as it touches upon the evaluation of academic CV for recruitment and promotion, as much as for funding and evaluation. Second, it touches also upon issues of transitions. And so this week in UCLouvain, it is the week of transition, that there are many other activities going on exactly at the same time at this event, actually. So it touches upon issues of transitions by advocating for more diversity and inclusiveness in evaluation. And it will thus allow for better acknowledgement of scientific activities related to transitions such as interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research. Three, it should help us to have more ambitious projects. I just wrote high risk, high gain, but apparently it's banned now. But I think it's meaningful if we give it a different meaning or different accent. And so we could have this more ambitious project breaking free from the logic of reproductions or conformity to already recognized research pathways, which can be strategic for some researchers, of course, to be published, but which also tends to perpetuate what we can say biases or to walk the same track. And so, in order to step out of these tracks, it may be important also not to encourage this perpetuation, which is not always very easy on the part of the researchers. Four, it will also allow for a better recognition of the societal impact of research and a better recognition of the time researchers devote to it. It contributes to address the university societal responsibility, not only as a strategic asset in a competitive environment, but as a driving force in transforming the community, bringing in its critical and scientific expertise and mindset. So it has therefore, to me, I think, a considerable potential of transformation. But it also comes with major challenges. So while frameworks such as CoARA have established shared principles, many universities face challenges translating these into concrete institutional policies and practices, hence the more than 2 years, for example, for the action plan, and also for many universities for not having published yet their action plan, maybe. And so the gap between strategic commitments and operational change remains one of the main obstacles to the cultural change required by the reform. And as you know, cultural changes are really very difficult to achieve and can only be envisaged on the long term. So to illustrate these challenges and to conclude, I will come back to today's event and recall that it is organized by the work group STEM of Coimbra. It reminds us that all fields of science do not have the same position with regard to CoARA. And it is of the utmost importance to keep this information in mind when devising the action plan and implementing it. It is certainly necessary to have a differentiated approach depending on the scientific field, as well as a differentiated implementation schedule. It is at least the position that we are adopting at UCLouvain in order to embark as many scholars as possible, reflecting together with the concerned community on their usual ways of evaluating the quality of their research and trying to find with them the best way to move on. Because it is also key to have the university community to adhere to the principles of CoARA and participate in the cultural change. And I mean here, and that's something that was said before, but I could only agree with that, that anyone who has a leadership position in research and HR, such as the supervisors, the PIs of projects, deans for research and teaching, and of course anyone in the governing body of the university. So anyone who has a leadership position should be active in the transformation and integrate in their practices and activities the philosophy that underpins the reform. And I think that integration is certainly a key factor for success. So not adding more layers to the heavy work that we already have to do, but really integrate gradually the reform within the activities that we develop inside the procedures on various scale. However, it is a necessary but not sufficient condition. The change should be carried out within the university, but will not be complete if it is not led also at an international level. And this is the reason why university networks are so important in this implementation, but we will debate on this topic in the second part of this afternoon, and I will not dwell on it. University networks are key actors in the reform, so for sure, sharing practices, making sure we are progressing in the same direction, etc., but also working on changing other major actors of research. And I'm thinking here more precisely of the publication and editors world. And I think that's really at the core also of the action of CoARA. But I think it's really crucial. There is a considerable effort to make to change the way publications are produced and published, to change the mindset of the editor's world, or to find alternate ways of publishing and sharing knowledge. It is a need, and it is a big challenge to tackle, and a topic in itself for another event. But it's where university networks, I think, can make really difference and can be impactful. Thank you.
So we have time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Maybe I could have one.
Don't feel obliged.
No, actually, I'm interested. You will see. No, because indeed, I mean, you explicitly mentioned that it took UCLouvain 2 years to achieve that key milestone of publishing the work plan. Of course, the idea is not that you develop in depth, but as a university leader, what were the main challenges that could be good to know when you are on the same path? You see, it's an interested question.
Well, the first thing is that there was a change in the rectoral team. So Jean-Christophe signed the agreement. Thank you. And they started the job. But I think the 2 years was a good timing, because it allowed us to have this collective, this collaborative work at a national level. So that's why I really mentioned that. That was the first step for us. And I think that's something that takes time, obviously. The other challenge was now to go back home and to devise our own plan. And there, the change in the governing, in the leadership of the university took us some time to move on. So I think that time is crucial. So I think it's nice not to have sanctions or, you know.
I did not pay her for saying this.
So, but we did it.
Congratulations. Yes. If we can have the microphone here. Can you raise again? Yes, thank you. And that will be the last question for now, but then we'll have more time later.
Thank you very much. Actually, I have 2 quick questions. The first one, I mean, you mentioned that CoARA should be improved and conceived differently according to different disciplines and different fields, in a way. So metrics are a lot about hard science, about STEM, and so on and so forth. So I was wondering, in your opinion, what could be the contribution of humanities or social science in the reform of research assessment? This is the first question. And the second one is, I'm the coordinator of the CoARA at the University of Padua in Italy. And a few months ago, I had a meeting with the head of department. And I was really, really surprised that the directors that were more favorable to CoARA were actually from STEM, and in particular, and also from medicine department. So it was a huge surprise for me. Actually, I expected exactly the opposite. So in your experience, I mean, you just started in this role of prorector, but in your experience, what was the, I mean, what is the feelings of different fields about CoARA? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I was also surprised that recently the vice rector for the medical sector managed to implement something that for evaluation, where they would not take into account the metrics, or not in the same to the same extent that they used to do so far. So yeah. So it's nice to be surprised in this way, first of all. And to answer your first question about the contribution that the humanities and social sciences can make to CoARA, first of all, I just offered, for example, to have an open seminar on what is a narrative, and the power of a narrative. And that's something that could be something really important to understand. What it is exactly to have a narrative quality in your CV or anywhere in a project. What does it bring? What is the added value? What can you say there that you cannot say otherwise? So, for example, there are many. I'm sure there are plenty of other possible contributions, but I think that we can think along these lines.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Agnès, once again. We have been informed that actually the fourth speaker who will intervene online has a time constraint, and because we are a little bit behind schedule, we will, and our other speaker agreed, we will now move actually to our colleague online. So I hope we will hear and see her. So we will now have Professor Maria Laura Bolognesi, who is the coordinator of the Chemical Sciences panel at ANVUR, which is the Italian agency. And also she's at the University of Bologna. So I hope, yes, we see you. We see your slides, Maria Laura, and hopefully we can hear you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so sorry for the problems we experienced last time, but very glad that I had the opportunity to share with you my reflection on research assessment. I'm a professor at the University of Bologna, and in the first year, I'm deeply involved in the matter of research assessment because I'm leading the chemistry panel for an evaluation taking place in Italy. And specifically, if you look at my role here, I'm the coordinator of this JEV number 3. Within this exercise for evaluating research in Italy, which is called VQR 2020-2024. What is a VQR? This is an acronym which stands for Research Quality Evaluation, and is an exercise through which the Italian agency called ANVUR analyze and measure the quality of scientific output produced not only by university, but also by research institutions, several types of research institutions, with the aim, of course, of promoting a competitive research system capable of contributing to the scientific and technological advancement of our country. This exercise is conducted every 5 years and involves the analysis of scientific publication primarily, but also other research outputs such as what we call the knowledge enhancement case studies, infrastructure reports from research institutions, and also international competitive projects. And this is the general scheme. And to do that, there are evaluation of expert panels that are called JEV. I would like to stress how critical is the role of these evaluation expert panels that are composed of research and academics, and they are the ones who have the responsibility to carry out the analysis and the evaluation of the submitted outputs that I mentioned before. They can be supported by external reviewers, so we can be supported by external reviewers, but I will come back to this in a minute. There are 17 panels that correspond to the 17 discipline areas like maths, physics, chemistry, biology, and so on. And I'm the coordinator of this JEV area number 3, which is devoted to chemical science. It's a quite a big panel, which is composed by 37 members, and I have organized, because in my opinion this was quite big, I have organized this for a better leadership into 4 sub-JEV, which are coordinated by 4 different persons. Why ANVUR makes these VQR? Of course, these are the principles behind the research evaluation, such as promote and stimulate the quality of research in our country, stimulate improvements in the quality of recruitment and career progression, increase international visibility and participation in internal projects, stimulate improved spending capacity, because of course, according to the results of VQR, university and entities will receive funding, stimulate improvements in the quality of doctoral training, because even the outputs from the PhD candidates are submitted to evaluation, and encourage an open access to data and publication, because there is a focus on open access in this exercise. Like it should be, this is a continuous improvement process, because this evaluation is periodical, and each one is based on the results and the experience learned on the previous one. And specifically for these ones, the experience of the previous evaluation were taken into account, and this suggestion came not only from internal discussion, but also through the opinion that ANVUR gained from foreign experts from ERC, REF, European Alliance, and so on, to improve a critical aspect of the evaluation. I believe this is quite fundamental. And in addition to this, so this kind of continuous improvement process, which should make each exercise better than the previous one, to me, it has been very fundamental that ANVUR joined CoARA. And this was in 2023. And now, ANVUR in Italy is actively engaged in rethinking research evaluation at the national level. And in Italy, ANVUR consolidates its role in the process of reforming research evaluation methods, contributing to the improvement of the academic and scientific system, especially national, but also internationally. And as you can see in the next slides, in the exercise that we are doing, we can recognize the principle of CoARA. And especially the first 3, recognize the diverse contribution to research, base research assessment primarily on quality evaluation, and abandon improper use of metrics. In fact, what is new with respect to the previous edition in this one is a strong focus on quality, because the main responsibility of the JEV, of the group of experts, is to evaluate the quality of each publication, of each product which is selected by the institution. And for doing so, everything is focused on the peer review. So the system that we adopt is the peer review methodology. And just to get rid from the use of metrics, which were much more important in the previous edition, we are informed by these international citation indexes. And also by, we consider the number of self-citation. But what is written even in the call made by Hamburg, and is that these indices that inform the evaluation cannot in any case replace an accurate assessment of the merit, nor can they result in automatic assignment. So the evaluation is informed, but not based on metrics. I will explain a little bit better in the next slides. And also, because everything is focused on the quality, it is very important that the reviewers is an expert in that particular field. So that, as I said at the beginning, the panel is quite big. So almost all the disciplines and subdisciplines of chemistry are present. But in case there are no experts in that specific topics, we can even make use of external evaluators. And for selecting them, an AI system is also available to ourselves. And now, what Hamburg has done to recognize the diverse contribution, which, as we know very well, is another fundamental point for CoARA. There was a clear goal of expanding the product types to be evaluated. So not only journal contribution, like scientific monograph, volume contribution, conference proceedings, in addition to the normal articles, but also data sets, software, workflow, protocols, prototypes, intellectual property rights, technical reports, which are not so common as the others, because most of the products that we are evaluated are articles, scientific article in journal. But in any case, to me, it has been a clear direction that we want to recognize a wide range of contribution, not only evaluate research based on articles. And as I mentioned before, also there is also a researcher who have obtained a PhD are evaluated, and this is regardless of their current membership. I mean, even if the PhD is not in the same institution, was the previous one where he or she got the PhD, it's mandatory even for them to submit papers, articles, or other types of product to be evaluated. And also, even always with the perspective of a diverse contribution, in spite the evaluation is based on this disciplinary JEB, like maths, physics, chemistry, there is also the possibility that one product type is evaluated by two different JEB. So this is because we want to valorize even the papers and the articles or the products that are between two different areas. So this is important, in my opinion, for interdisciplinary publications. Practically, what we do, when we review our products, we evaluate according to three main quality criteria. One is related to originality, one to methodology, and one to impact. Originality, everybody knows what is originality and also methodology for articles and in general scientific products, but I would like to focus on the impact, because this is what I copied from the call. Impact is the ability of the product to generate in the short, medium, or long term an effect or benefit for the national and international scientific community and or on the economic and social context. So an idea of impact which is much broader than just citations or impact factor and so on. Few details on how it works practically. So after these products, you have realized that we call them products, are conferred by the institution. They are evaluated by 2 reviewers within the JEV, and they independently express a judgment on the 3 different criteria, such as originality, methodology, and impact, and make a short report. After that, the 2 members, the 2 JEV components, come into contact, but before the evaluation is blind, and then they should make an agreement. But as in every panel, then the final responsibility of the evaluation lies within all the JEV. And after this process, each product is categorized into different classes, which are shown here, like A, B, C, D, or E. Here some notes that, okay, the score is between 1 and 10. The evaluation concerned the product as a whole and not the contribution of the author. And as I said many times, the evaluation is based exclusively on the quality and not on the type of product delivered, and also as well on the language of drafting. Now, coming back to the point of a responsible use of matrices or quantitative indicators, I liked a lot what Ambur have done, because when we receive the data, and the data for each publication that are available to the reviewers are these, impact indices, 5-year impact factor, article influence for WOS, score, SIMAGO, for Scopus, and the percentile, but this data visually appears like using a traffic light system. And I believe this is a clear sign that we want to get an idea, but not to want to stick exactly to the numbers of impact factor or citation and so on. So to me, this is very symptomatic of what is happening. And in spite it's a little details, but I liked this a lot. And of course, Ambur is committed to conduct these activities in line with the core values, like, these are in Italian, but loyalty, impartiality, confidentiality, and also some law regulation and code of ethics, which is proper of Ambur. So what I have learned, yes, I'm truly convinced that change in research assessment is imperative and is also achievable. And we are, as a member of the community, surely responsible for driving it, especially, in my opinion, it's very important to organize events like those you have organized, Ruben, because it is so critical to sharing best practice among the countries of the European community. Yes, we should share best practice among all the people in the world, but we know that now the problem is there is a different vision in Europe rather than in the US, but of course we should aim to have the same vision everywhere. This is, yes, I'm convinced, I'm committed, but there are practical problems because all the exercises that I have explained relates to almost 10,000 research products to review. And each reviewer in 3-4 months has to review around 500 products. So as you can imagine, it's a massive workload. Maybe if we want to always put much more focus on quality, we could consider the idea to fewer items to be submitted. This for sure would streamline the process. I believe that this is also the direction of CoARA. This is what I have learned. I hope that could be useful for everyone, but I'm very much convinced that we should learn from each other if we want to even make a change. Thank you very much.
I'm very pleased now to welcome on the stage Professor Véronique Allouin, who is the Secretary General of the FNRS. So now we will hear the funders' viewpoints that are also part of this reform.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for giving me the floor to speak today on the implementation of CoARA. And of course, I will take the perspective of a research funding agency. This is the FNRS. So FNRS is the research funding agency of a fundamental and strategic research in French-speaking Belgium. We recruit and we employ researchers hosted at universities, and we also fund project equipment, mobility, international cooperation for our researchers as well as for the academic staff of the universities. So European Commission and some 600 organizations launched CoARA in 2022 because for decades research assessment has been dominated by metrics, well-known quantitative indicators. But I think that this phenomenon has really varied from country to country. It was never dominant in French-speaking Belgium. However, well, it generated many distortions on published operation, biases towards certain disciplines, tendency to reward quantity over quality, and also little recognition of the diversity of contributions. But also, and it was mentioned by the first speaker, European Commission had a strong motivation. It was because in the current research assessment practice in terms of journals and metrics, they wanted, in fact, to set the target on open science. And it was not really possible in the current system, and because there were barriers. So it was a really strong motivation from the Commission. Assessing quality rather than quantity is a key principle in CoARA, and this should be attained by two commitments mentioned already by the first speaker. Commitment 2 is it's about the central role of peer review in evaluation and also the responsible use of metrics. And the commitment 3 is about journal and publication-based metrics. And I think that we meet this expectation, most of them. At FNRS, I will give an example. Peer review is really at the heart of our process. First step, international remote experts. And second step, discussion and ranking by scientific commission. It's really similar to the process in place at European Research Council, also mentioned previously. And for this, we have developed a database of more than 20,000 international experts. And you can see here the countries on the map, the countries of the host institution, colored from dark purple to light pink in a descending order of the number of experts per country. Metrics, we asked the applicants to provide the metrics. It's the H-index, the number of papers and number of citations, but they can choose not to give them and say that it is not relevant for the field. It should also be mentioned that we have discussed with representatives from researchers, and most of them said that they wanted to give the metrics. because nobody, especially of course in the STEM and life science field, because nothing can prevent the experts, the member of the scientific commission, from researching them and possibly making mistakes. We have some narrative, it's not a narrative CV, but we have dedicated boxes in the application form, and where, for instance, yes, the applicant may, if they wish, discuss the publication strategy. It means they can mention the choice of journal, the position as co-author, also publication frequency. For instance, they can say, okay, I don't have a lot of publication because I prefer to publish a full, very big paper instead, rather than splitting the results of my work in short articles. And yes, also I would like to point out that the use of metrics in our scientific commission was not an institutional policy. It came from the members of the commission themselves, specifically in certain fields. So, of course, there is some cultural resistance to overcome, and it's very field-dependent. So at the meeting, we explained, we just remind the members that we are signatory to DORA, we are signatory to ARA, that the metrics is just an element among others. They can, of course, be taken into account, but just an element among others. And, of course, that they are very field-dependent, and they depend a lot on the seniority of the applicant. But they have also other narrative, optional narrative section. They can comment on their previous work, on the open science practice, or the period of inactivity, if they have, or also the mobility or the lack of mobility, the interdisciplinary contents of the work, or any other comments they want. But these are optional sections. For applicants for postdoc positions or permanent position, they are asked to post the full text of the 5 more relevant publications of their choice. And they also ask to comment the role in the contribution, in the production of the publication. So the experts can read it very easily. They just have to click on a button. And since 2 or 3 years, applicants for permanent position can access the reports of the remote experts from step 1, and they can submit a rebuttal before the meeting of the scientific commission, so they can clarify some misunderstanding or correct inaccuracies in the evaluation of the CV, the publications, or the project. I think this is important, and I would like to try to convince you that metrics are really not dominant in our evaluation process. Here, between 21 and 23, the board has recruited 47 permanent researchers, and here are a point. Each of them is represented by a point on this diagram with the H-index in ordinate and with the number of publications in abscissa. We have 3 color codes: blue for exact natural sciences, green for humanities and social sciences, and red for health and life sciences, because I forgot to tell that as a funding agency, we cover all the field of science. And well, you can see a potato-shaped object. I mean, it means that the recruitment of researchers does not correspond to one metric profile. And for instance, here, we have recruited 2 researchers in the health and life science with less than 10 as H-index, and a bit more, maybe less than 10 publications. And in the same time, we have recruited a researcher in the same field with an H-index of 25 and 100 publications. So I think it's a clear proof that bibliometric indicators don't dictate everything, far from it. Well, and we have also other good practice in line with the CoARA principles, transparency on evaluation criteria, management of potential conflict of interest, clear guidelines to the applicants and to the evaluators, communication, also the presence of observers from the universities in the scientific commission. We realize post-call analysis and we publish them on our website. We make surveys among the stakeholders. We send feedback to applicants. So I think this contributes to strengthen the confidence and the trust of the stakeholders in our evaluation procedure, even if I know that everything can be improved all the time. We all agree. But There are also other expected benefits for science and for the future of science, and this is mainly due to the reduced focus on the volume of publications, because this, of course, this encourages open science practices. It's also encouraged interdisciplinarity, because those kind of projects take longer and yield less conventional outputs. Also encouraging risky projects, or high risk, high gain, or risky, we can discuss the wording, but because risk-taking includes potential failure and less publications, and it also encourages the development of behavior, strengthening research integrity. There is the first commitment of ARA, and on that one, I think that our position is maybe a bit different than the position of the universities. So it's about recognizing the diversity of contributions to and career in research. So for university, I think there is a strong focus on career assessment, and there is a CoARA working group on it. And so it's about who gets hired, who gets promoted, who gets rewarded. It's about recognizing the multiple missions of university, the teaching, research, and this third mission. And of course, for time, heavy weight is given on the research dimension of the activities. And also, it's about taking into account the wide array of academic contributions and the local context. I think, but we'll maybe come back on it, but if a university wants to promote an academic with a little investment in research, it can be fully understandable. But the university should not expect that those profiles will be very positively evaluated. Yes. Okay. As a funding agency, the diversity is really limited to its consistency with the needs and the nature of the research, and this is evaluated by the peers. Of course, well, our mission is to rank and select projects and researchers. So we organize the call as a anti-university competition. So we don't have really room for local context, and it's about really how can we recognize the diversity of scientific contribution without weakening the focus on excellence, and ERC has, of course, obviously the same problems as us. Maybe just to finish some challenges, I will make it short. The CoARA does not really address the peer review issue. This is a real challenge, a real issue, because it's what about the workload? What about the cost, the biases, because peer review is not immune from biases and subjectivity. What about also the input, well, the impact of artificial intelligence that will come in this evaluation process? I think that there is room for discussion, and also, just to finish, there is a strong expectation from the scientific community that depends on the field, and it was mentioned from CoARA, but to the extent that many researchers think that, okay, CoARA is there, so I will get funded. But just keep in mind that the funding success rate is 20%. So, it's really crucial to identify the appropriate criteria that depends of why do you assess someone, for which reason. So you have to choose properly a criteria, and also to give proper weight. Too few criteria is probably unfair for diversity, but too many generate, I think, a vague and subjective evaluation. So this, for me, is really an issue. And as a funding agency, of course, we have responsibility, because the way you select, it's the way you fund, and it influences the research, the way it is done, and also the way it is published. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Véronique. We have time for questions. I would expect that, in particular, the colleagues from UCLouvain who are benefiting from your funding
benefit a lot of
may have specific questions. Yes, please here. And I don't know, because for the online colleagues as well, so if the mic can arrive.
Hello, my name is Amaury Peters from UCLouvain. So thank you for your presentation. Especially also would like to raise one point about the map you show about the large database of 20,000 people that you could actually include into this assessment. I was quite surprised to see kind of a big empty countries, even continent, where there were very few people that were included into your database, despite the fact that it's high number. What are the strategies of the National Research Fund to complete these gaps, or maybe do you have any strategies to include additional people from Africa and Asia, as it was quite highlighted?
Well, it's a growing database, and we started with 2,000, now 20,000. Of course, we have a couple of countries, France, for instance, well represented because humanities and social sciences, they are not obliged to introduce the application in English. They can use French. So we have also Canada and France. And for the strategy, no, it's a good question. I will discuss with my scientific officer on this. But the first, we received a research project, and they try to find if we have experts in the field of the proposition. So they focus on the themes and the summary of the proposal. And so they try to find, if we don't have experts in our database, they try to find in the literature authors, and they contact them. So it's more driven by the thematics of the applications we receive. And, but that's right, I agree that we don't have a lot in Africa. I will transfer the question. Thank you.
More questions? One here.
Cisalouin Otsimar from University of Louvain. I have a question concerning the effect it could have on gender equality. It is sometimes, I have already heard that argument that narratives are sometimes unbalanced between male and female. Oh. I just wanted to have your thoughts about that, and it's probably a question I could raise to any of the intervening people today, but probably it's important, I guess, for FNRS, for the French-speaking community. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not really a narrative application. So there are just dedicated boxes where they can use it if they want to transmit to the expert comments. But I know that there is literature on that aspect, and probably we should take that into account. We make a lot of things for gender equality. We have a gender plan. We have parity in the composition of our scientific commission, the international commission. And that maybe, I think it should be about, well, the guidelines, huh? It's in the guidelines that we should take into account. We have mini guidelines for the applicants, and probably we should look carefully if maybe we could add some comments with this respect. Okay. And yeah. Thank you for your question.
I know it's a complicated question.
Yeah, it's a complicated, but well, we have to try. Yes.
I have actually maybe a not so politically correct question, but I guess we can cope with it, right? Oh. Actually, you showed that in your criteria, or let's say your form for submission, you have those optional
optional boxes
yes. And so on. Is it actually enough to create a real change that they are still optional?
But I think that we don't have to create a real change because we are really already aligned with most of the dimension recommended by CoARA. But it's really so I think so. But I think it's enough, yes. Well, there is also the question for ChatGPT for the writing of the narrative CV. We can discuss this during the debate. We improve it year after year. For instance, the mobility, the box on the mobility, there were discussion about most of the members of the commission say, oh, we need mobility when you apply for postdoc. Say, okay, if we need it, if you take that into account, we should put it in the application form so the candidate know that this is an element and that he or she can mention in the box, I don't make mobility because I have little children. It's not possible for me for my family life. Look, I think it's a good point. And from team to team, we try to improve the things. And on the publication strategy, I think it was also important, but I don't say it's enough. But also, if you have too many boxes, and also, I mean, it's more difficult, I think, for universities because you have to deal with the three missions, three categories of mission. In our case, it's just research. So I think it's easier for us.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before going to the question, thank you, we will have some introductory words by Ludovic Tilly. So, Ludovic.
You can hear me? Yes? Okay. Yeah, actually, first I should apologize because in principle I should have stayed until the end, but you heard that we have some celebratory 40th anniversary celebratory events, and one is actually in a few hours, and actually few is is a big word. So I have to rush back to Brussels Center to finalize all the preparations. So that's why I will have actually, I have this sort of special statute of being in the panel, but outside of the panel. So I will say a few words about this idea around what can be the role of the networks. And actually in the wording, there was this network of European universities. So for those who know also what is the other very big hot topic in Europe, which are the alliances of European universities, which for UCLouvain is actually the alliance Circle U, right? These European universities can also be seen as twofold. So the networks, what I will call the traditional networks, like Coimbra Group, like the Guild, Leroux, etc. And now we have this new beast, which is the Alliance of European Universities. So basically, the whole question is how this type of collaborative frameworks can actually serve our purpose here. So some elements of reflections, and then of course I leave our panel members to agree or not. I will not be there anymore, so feel free to contradict me. I have a few spies here, so I will know at some point. But no, actually, so first, some elements of reflections where clearly we knew already, but this afternoon I think we have a fair view on the fact that the reform of research assessment is complex, complex in nature, complex in implementation, and this in the different levels. I mean, the European, the national, and of course at the end, at the level of the universities. So we're starting with, let's say, what I will call the traditional university networks. Again, Coimbra Group, Leroux, the Guild, etc. I think they really play a crucial role in raising awareness. And this in particular has been really true for Coimbra Group, because we were, as I said in my initial opening remarks, we were at the table from the beginning, and it is actually by bringing this to the member universities that they were basically first informed in Europe about this upcoming reform, which placed them in a very good position for starting their internal reflections. And it is not a surprise then to see that among the first signatories, a lot of the universities were from the Coimbra Group and other big networks, traditional networks. So we have been also able then, by consulting our member universities, to contribute directly from the beginning to the shape of CoARA and its key components. So this, I think, is very good in this role of advocacy that traditional networks are playing. Another dimension is the fact that those traditional networks, to my opinion, can also nicely highlight good practices and can also provide a peer learning space a safe space also for the members, so they can openly share what works, what doesn't work, because this is, again, a well-identified and safe space. And we have seen as well that it's really good in identifying institutions that are leading by example. I can openly tell you that in our case, Utrecht University has been absolutely instrumental as a member university in creating a real momentum within the group. On many occasions, actually, we invited you at that time, Henk, to our close rectors meetings, so that at that time you were already sort of pioneering these practices in Utrecht University and demonstrating basically that this was possible. And then when the framework was available, it was much easier than for our member universities to say, well, okay, let's now take that momentum on board as well. So we could fairly say that traditional networks in that context can act as facilitators. They can also help coordinating. They can provide guidance and also shared tools. And by the way, I was very happy to see that now there will be this library of tools. And of course, you can count on Coimbra Group to immediately share this with all the member universities. Now, I said there is a new kid on the block, which is the Alliance of European Universities, which is a totally different framework, I would say. We could speak of rather deep collaborations, not yet maybe on all the missions of the university, but this is now a reality that we need to take on board. So if I rapidly compare, I would say probably that the traditional networks, they operate at a much more strategic and advocacy level, while the alliances, from what I've seen, and myself been coordinating one, I would say that they maybe have a role in the implementation of, in particular, CoARA. And we have some examples because the alliances, at least the pilot alliances, and actually Circulio is one of them, and the one I'm coordinating is EC2U. So we are from the same wave, actually, selected first in 2020. Some of you may know that at that time we benefited from a very dedicated Horizon 2020 project funding, which was under the Science with and for Society program of Horizon 2020. And it was helping the alliances, the pilot alliances, to start some sort of capacity building together in research and innovation. And we have seen actually already at that time, so we talk about the years 21 till 24, we have seen that some alliances had already included in their Horizon 2020 capacity building project activities around starting to push them to have an approach, a joint approach to the reform of research assessment. So obviously we need to take them on board for also CoARA. So I would say that maybe in that case this complementarity would strengthen the ecosystem, since networks promote shared principles and policy alignments, and alliances, they would test solutions on the ground and build operational models. And then we could see the sort of feedback where the alliances can also help then the networks for broader dissemination. So I see actually this now as a sort of a back and forth dialogue that can actually really serve the community overall. So my temporary conclusion would be that to advance the reform of research assessment, we need, this is not new, a significant shift of, or change of paradigm and a profound transformation of the research culture. Again, we said this many times. This change must involve the entire ecosystem, the institutions, the researchers, the funders, we had examples, publishers, you mentioned, policymakers, and this means we need to revise our long-established practices. We need to adopt a more responsible, qualitative, and value-based approach to evaluating research and researchers. And I think clearly in this challenge, there is no meaning in putting into competition traditional networks and alliances of European universities, but they are absolutely needed because, again, they work on different scales and different implementation level. So that's my contribution to your discussion now, and you are free to contradict this, of course, and I warmly thank you for this really interesting workshop. I will sit and listen to you carefully. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ludovic, for this, but I think you said it all, so maybe we can coffee. And actually, it really is in line with the questions that we would like to address during this panel session. So I will start with the first question, which is really at the heart of this event. So which could be a kind of reaction or answer to Ludovic's presentation. Because it's really, how do you see the role of European university networks, especially as catalysts for cultural and institutional change, but also as lobbyists to support the change in other research stakeholders, international journals, funding research agencies. So how do you see maybe what could be the concrete next steps? So I don't know who wants to go first.
Yeah, well, okay, thank you very much for invitation. Well, let me state first that I would rather talk about the European University Alliances in this new sense. As Ludovic was saying, I am representing UNA Europa, also one of these first founded alliances. The deep cooperation in form, which is, well, the basic assumption for forming such an alliance, is really essential for many things. However, and I can contradict a bit with you, that alliances are not test bed for everything. That cannot be the case because, this is, even if there were some funding for research support and development, the main funding and main idea from Commission comes to, establish new or, some novel educational formats and forms for students. Research assessment is really difficult to be tested within the alliances of, let's say, 11 or 9 or 10 universities. They are all embedded in a very different legal and funding systems, and even if the research assessment, the assessment of researchers, individual researchers, is usually and almost always in hands of individual universities, the influence from outside, from the national-wide rules is of course seen. And then to harmonize it, it's really difficult. However, of course, we can do many important things, like exactly trying to find the best procedures out of the set we have, namely, facilitating mobilities in different forms, or harmonizing administrative procedures for what was mentioned in the HR system, and then trying them out. And that will be really the test bed for something which then can be shared, between the alliances, by the networks, which these traditional networks can be seen as facilitators and interface also between different alliances. There is time also for the alliances to share their experiences, and it happens. And for that, we also need right policy which will be rewarding cooperation and not competition. Yeah, that's also in the funding sometimes, which is difficult. So how I do not see really how the alliance of 11 universities, even if it would, as ours, contain Bologna, the oldest university, very famous, and other research active universities, can influence publishers in the whole body. I think that the common work of alliances, which would agree on that we should, and I am completely in agreement with what the colleagues were saying, that we have to change the publishing culture. That is what is now a disaster for the research, and we have to change it. However, we cannot test it, or we can test it with very bold universities which could afford that. So I think that, so I see the point in really harmonizing certain administrative procedures and testing them, and then putting them as a toolbox for others. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, so you've addressed just now what we could do, what the alliances could share. So these are aspects of the work that can be done by networks and alliances has been well explained and presented. Sharing practices, exchanging knowledge, sharing resources, etc. But I think that another aspect has not been really much explained, even though you've just mentioned that you don't know how to do it. But would you have something to say about the lobbyist aspect, or what can we do concretely, or can we imagine something? Would you have something to say, Henk, maybe about this?
It's an amazing thing if you look back in history, and you don't have to look that far in history. Initially, European university alliances were only 20 seconds in the speech from President Macron. And now we have a tremendous amount of already university alliances. And they develop themselves, but also in a different speed. And I think that we would be very aware of the fact that they are different. They have different ideas and different focus when it comes to changing things. As for instance, the University Alliance that our universities participated in China, also one of the first ways, that was really about making indeed a very innovative approach in education. But after a few years, we said, well, this cannot work if we don't put research alongside this work. So we're not waiting for the extra money from the European Commission. We really want to put the money, also from our participating university, at least some amount of money in that project, and that makes sure that we really have to think about how we could really reward the people that were our researchers participating in these projects. So of course there are legal barriers. I finally found a way to disagree with this time. There are legal barriers, but we have to find ways to overcome them. And we have to do that also with the broader framework of the European Union, of course. That's the qualitative endeavor I was talking about. And I think that what we see now, and to some of the traditional networks, well, I'm not very pleased with that. I can sure that the European University Alliances have the ear of the European Commission. They're listening to these newly established European alliances that are also working together to a certain level. So they are very important instruments in organizing change, organizing development. And I think that's Ludovic to some extent already referred to that. That's a very important role that the alliances can play. Ambassador for new development, but also making sure that these older networks, that more traditional networks, really are picking up. And it's also to the benefit of these participating universities themselves, but because you cannot, let's say, be running ahead of each and every one without making sure that the rest is following.
Absolutely.
So make sure that the broader research community, at least in Europe, is moving into towards the same direction.
That's certainly one of the biggest challenges, really, just to move the same path. Véronique, would you like to add something?
No, I'm not. Well, regarding the alliance, I think there are some of them are really not involved in research and really focus on teaching. So and mention, I think the critical mass is not reached inside an alliance, and so I think something like Coimbra is probably better to exchange knowledge and exchange different things. For sure. I can just give an example. At FNRS, we changed the evaluation system very in drastic way about 15 years ago. And at the time, we had a network of funding agencies. The name was ESF, European Science Foundation, but it's changed now. It's known under Science Europe. But they produced at the time a guideline of benchmark. They made benchmark among the funding agencies and research operators on the best practice on evaluation. And this was really key for me because I could build on this to convince my board that we had to change. And you see, so this is the power of a network, really a driving force to help you to implement your own modifications. I think it's very important, and this was very useful. Maybe just another thing. I think it's difficult for a university to be an early mover because, of course, they're afraid that to disadvantage the researchers in competitive funding. And if you do it inside our network, you really move with the network. I think it's easier because alone, nobody will do it.
Yeah, who will go first? That's
but
the
sometimes, well, I'm very convinced that sometimes you really have to move.
Yes.
And to set a certain standard. For instance, what we did a couple of years ago, making a decision within our university, we will not deliver any data anymore to these commercial rankings. And some people said, now also in our university, you're mad, you're completely mad. Yeah, well, it did not affect the number of students that came in, it did not affect the amount of money that came in. In fact, the reason behind it, well, I explained it earlier in my talk, why we're not doing it anymore. That's also a rationale that lies behind that, the advancing research assessment. So, well, and in fact, when it comes to the European Research Council, the heaps of money keep flowing in, and we're not there anymore in times higher education. So, I'm not sure if that's evidence, but I think it can also be very helpful, at least in making sure that a lot of other institutions really think about that as well, about the possibility at least.
Okay, so it's an advocacy for being bold, for sure.
Okay, sure.
There is another question that we had was a very more concrete one. What kind of support do you think the universities need from national agencies, where these agencies exist, and from the government or ministries to advance this reform? I think there's something to expect, actually, from the political world, in other words.
It's something
for the reform,
It's something to demand from the political world. If I can start, I think, well, first, in the first place, I will give the example in line with what was said before, but I think that universities need freedom to act, to exercise something which is on the edge or even slightly behind the borders of what is considered legal or completely legal. So for alliances or for some kinds of alliances, it is testing some new solutions would be of great benefit, because if it is not successful, it will die out. And if it is successful, it can contribute to the evolution of the whole system of a given country or region. And one of these examples, still coming back to the networks, I think kind of a network or group of lobbyists is national chapter. I am also coordinator of Polish national chapter, and addressing also what was one question which was asked in the previous panel. I think that we had some well, potential, at least, influence on our ministry. We are very much, a lot of talk is in Poland about well, evaluation of institutions. Cutting it short, well, now I was talking with the vice minister responsible for evaluation for a year about CoARA and its principle, and the minister was dismissed. Not because of that, but I continue now with another minister responsible for that, and we see. I can see. Well, I don't know it is implication or correlation, but that's in the prospects for new evaluation of institutions. I saw already that minister, she was writing explicitly that it will be a rule which discourages or forbids even to transfer directly institutional evaluation on evaluation or assessment of individual researchers. I cannot imagine how such law can be written, but anyhow it is already some indication that the ideas of CoARA are there. Also the recognition of wider scope of activities in research of researchers and institution is foreseen. So really lobbying in some group, because that's not what I was saying, the alliance, international alliance, but the group of CoARA members from one country can influence this, maybe even the legal system, which can be then harmonized, hopefully, also around Europe.
Mm-hmm. Okay, do you want to add something?
Yeah, well, as always, there's a very difficult balancing act going on within the European Union. The question was about support by the national governments, but we know for sure that some national governments will not give the support, because some national governments are run by mainly populist parties, and they're not interested in facts and our insights, and they're more interested in providing for, let's say, organizing budget cuts for the elitist universities. We see it all over in Europe, and we saw it also quite recently in the Netherlands, with Mr. Wilders, one of the leading parties. And quite recently we see it in Flanders, where the Academy for Arts and Sciences will get no budget anymore. Yeah, so these kind of things are happening. Yeah. So instead of waiting for national support, and of course we need the national support, and coming back to your wonderful phrase, bold steps, I think some bold steps are also needed from the European Union when they're really going to pursue that ERA Act. If they really want to make sure that these 3% of GDP is there available, and that we really invest also in a national level, on a national level in research, then of course you have to come up with, let's say, legislation that is helpful. And the same goes for what's there in CoARA. What I heard in recent talks with representatives of the European Commission, that they're really thinking about laying down at least the core principles, the core commitments of CoARA into that European Research Area Act. So that there are some common standards there, I think, at least when it enters into force, that will be helpful in having a discussion and organizing a level playing field, at least within the European Union. So on a national level, of course we need the support, but I think that nowadays we need somewhat more help from the European Commission.
Europe.
Yeah.
So from what I hear, yeah, that's Europe.
Yeah.
That everything can be played really at the European level, and that's where things can really move on.
Yeah.
But on the map you showed, I think on the Western Europe, Belgium was the only one with no national chapter. Am I wrong?
But perhaps they should have a Francophone chapter,
yes,
or
yes.
a Flemish.
Yes, we'll work
German-speaking chapter.
Yeah. We'll work on this after this event, maybe. But I think it's important to stress this European dimension of the and importance really of the in order to implement CoARA, because so Europe can show the way, overcoming the national agenda. So that's an important aspect of it. Except that we would like Europe to show the way without adding administrative complexity to. Yes. And that's another challenge, I think, really for the implementation of CoARA, not adding more complexity, not. And I'm thinking here of maybe less fortunate, I would say, universities or smaller universities, where it is more difficult to face either the risk of budget cuts or the risk of of bold steps, or universities that have less resources from the outset. So how could we address that? Can the coalition itself do something for them, or is it again in the European hands?
No, it's not only in the European hands. I think that we, as universities, can do a lot more than we did up until now. I think that if we look at the broader view of open science, then it is very important that we really strive for open access productions, but also fair data, indeed open to all, let's say, universities in your network, and you have to find ways within your network to accommodate that, and make sure that, for instance, you align with each other when it comes to dealing with non-commercial or commercial publishers. I think we can make bigger fists in that battle if we join forces. And we don't have to wait for the European Commission, although the European Commission can be helpful when it sets the criteria for their grant system and these kind of things. Are also very relevant. But we can do more, as I said also with my colleagues in South Africa, amongst ourselves, joining forces as universities and knowledge institutions, working together and making, as I said before, a bigger fist for these kind of developments.
And so maybe within the universities, within the signatories of CoARA, working on really promoting new ways of publishing, alternative way of publishing, could be certainly a way out of the
you see it in all kinds of disciplines, also in parts of medicine, but I saw it also in recent years in earth sciences, where international colleagues came together and said to each other, why should we organize, let's say, peer review within the framework of Elsevier or whatever commercial publisher? We do it ourselves, and we can do it ourselves within our international organization. And we have the same amount of quality, and we pay far less for the publication. Yes. And the publication is there on the website or another, let's say, source or the template. So without reducing the quality, we can do better, we can do more for less money. Yeah. So that's also a way of joining forces and maintaining quality and perhaps even improving quality and opening up the material that you have for other less privileged institutions.
Yeah, but then only if it is then recognized also on the national level that you don't have to demonstrate that you publish in Elsevier or some other publisher. But for that we should be also able to argue. And let me mention in your question previous, well, you know the proverbs, small child, small problems, big child, big problems. So for universities it's also similar. So it's sometimes easier to run small universities than a big one, where the problems are also big and changing course is more difficult than in the lean small institutions. However, I think I support fully what Henk was saying and what was said before. We have to really induce a common movement in the same direction, and then we have really power to influence politicians maybe not this populist. I would agree that what I was saying, I was well able to speak to the ministers only after changing the system. And well, able to and at least someone listened to me. But it is really something that we have to insist on that we that we are able to care for the quality ourselves without help of big publishing houses, because they use us usually for that, and only taking not only but taking money for that and not paying the.
And what would be the position of the FNRS?
The position of the FNRS is really close to the one of the university, because we have a specific governance with the rectors of the university, member of the board. So this is not the case in most of the countries, and so it means that we have a really dialogue and so on. No, I think it's a key issue. If you say to a scientist, stop publishing in this prestigious review, you will have some problem. And even if the quality of the work can be as good as in a new, for me it's very, I don't see a real solution now. I know there is the Diamond movement. There are different initiatives. One Aero, yes. I think we'll have to convince the scientific community. Mm-hmm. Even if they pay a lot, I see they agree with me. I see some FNRS researchers agreeing. Yes, it's costly to go in a reputation review, but it's difficult for you not to go in it. And so I don't have a real solution. We tried the FNRS. They can't. We reimburse the cost of publications, but we limit it to 1,500. We come from 300 euros per publication, just to try to avoid the policy of the publishers and so on. But of course, it's not enough if you.
That is a very important element. What we saw in recent years was that the costs, the APCs, rose sky high. Mm-hmm. And if we want to circumvent that development, I'm sure a lot of people are very much still interested in publishing in Nature and Science and so on, these kind of things. But why bring 10,000 euros to them for each publication? Because they have even more than. They always keep on saying, we need this for maintaining quality and organizing peer review. I'll come back to the first argument that I gave you. Why don't we organize them ourselves? We have these international frameworks. Why can't we do it ourselves? Why bring a lot of money to these commercial publishers? Of course, I've nothing against businesses and enterprises, but since we were desperately in need of organizing quality ourselves and desperately in need of finding the money for doing so, why stay so dependent on these kind of institutions?
Yes. Well, I think that the problem is mainly that they make money out of for reading and publishing. That's the problem, that we double pay.
At CERN, they have developed a scope initiative. This is very interesting because it's open access, but they made a deal with a lot of publishers, and we pay for it, FNRS and other, in the proportion of the number of quota and it works well, I think. So there are maybe solutions, but this is very field restrictive to physics particle. It's easier, I think, to organize. And
so we have to.
But also in the field of humanities, you know for sure more about that. But in the humanities, but also my expertise is law. We have the tradition of publishing books. Yeah. And some people want to maintain that. That was okay with me. Yeah. But that is the reason that I said when I was writing a book and publishing a book on the universities and transitions with two of my vice rectors at that time, okay, we make sure that we published it on an open platform, accessible for each and every one for free. But if really somebody wants to have an old-fashioned traditional book, okay, print on demand. That is what how it works. So I have wonderful books on my bookshelves. But there's also a lot of material, the same material is out there in the open for free. So and I think that the quality of the book. We had peer review on that as well. It's still rather high, I hope so. But I think you can really work on, and that's also relevant for teaching material. You know? If you look at the costs for students nowadays for buying their books, well, it's terrible. So that's also a way forward of making teaching material accessible for lower costs.
Well, we should recognize that, just one sentence, that when you assess proposals, the stamp of quality is given by, reviewers. So you trust reviewers. In publications, we sometimes stick to the stamp of quality from the publisher, who is using reviewers for that. So why we need this indirect method, whereas we can also trust the quality on reviewers, and that will be this equivalent to nature and science, then you are referred by, I don't know, Prigogine or whoever. Yeah, that's the name. That's the quality. And we somehow trust the publishers, and of course the quality of sometimes, because you read publications and you see that not all of them are carefully refereed. Of course, that's also the case. So, well, that's a problem which it's. I think you all mentioned that it's a change of culture which we need. So slowly we should go in that direction.
Okay, I see the time going by. So maybe we have, before I make the very short closing remarks, we have the time to take maybe 1 or 2 questions from the room. We just talked about publications in the medical field, or I see lots of people from the STEM sector. Yes, Céline.
Thank you. It was mentioned a lot that indeed we can do the referee by ourselves, because in the end that's what happened, because it goes back to the scientific community to do the reports. But also in the particle physics, I know it's easier maybe there than anywhere else, we tend to make those reports public, which then avoid maybe also double counting of reassessing research over and over again, because papers have been evaluated, they come with evaluation reports, and then you don't need to ask another time to people to reevaluate a researcher again based on this publication and again for another application and so on and so forth. So not only it's interesting instead of saving money because you just need the stamp of the publisher, but also maybe it's interesting in the sense of avoiding to review again and again many times the same person. So is this something also which is discussed?
Yeah, this is a type of innovative thinking that we really need, I think. Yeah.
Maybe I know there are initiatives, for instance, at the Swiss National Fund for Research, but there it's in the case of the instruments for risky projects. I will say again, they don't take the CV and the publications; they just receive the project, the research project, and it's the only one that is evaluated. To avoid to be impressed by the reputation of researchers and to have really an open competition. Maybe in a second step, you have to ask, but in that case, really they focus just on the research project. But I know I discussed that with my board, and well, I was not really welcome. Say, okay, let's try something like this, because researchers, they have the CV, and they want the CV to be posted with the application. You see.
I think that the problem is that the researchers are taking themselves in a system, you know, and as long as we don't give the right signal for them to step out of this system, or that we don't give them the support for that, we will have some resistance to change, which can be understandable.
Of course, yes.
Okay, there's another question here, and maybe...
Well, the mic is running towards you.
Here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just share a quick comment. Probably one of my João Ramalho Santos, University of Coimbra, Portugal, by the way. Sorry. Sorry.
Yes.
João Ramalho Santos, University of Coimbra, Portugal. So I'll just share one of my most depressing stories on this topic. A few months ago, we opened a big European project. The nice project officer was there. And she said, all your research must be in completely open sources.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked the question, so you mean MDPI and Frontiers are in, and Nature and Science are out? And she said, yes, that's exactly what I mean. That was very frustrating. Sorry, I had to.
Yes, so we can work on this. Maybe one more or two more questions, brief, because there are taxis to be taken to go back to Brussels.
Don't leave me behind.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering about a big criteria that's always in for research is the results have to be reproducible, especially for experimental sciences. And this aspect is not taken into account for evaluation. So how can we guarantee that the published results are reproducible? Should this be a criteria for publication?
Yeah, well, we had to deal with a tremendous replication crisis a couple of years ago, especially in the area of the social sciences. And for me, it's quite obvious that that's part and parcel of the quality of the research that we produce. So if evaluation is not also based on that criterion, then something goes wrong. So we really have to make sure that this element is also part and parcel of, at least when it comes to especially research assessments over longer periods. Or what we also see in a lot of countries, we have periodical review of the quality of research groups, 6 years, 5 years, whatever, and that should be part and parcel of that project as well.
Merci. Okay, so one very short question, very brief.
Up there.
Yeah, thank you. Leonid Hinojosa from UCLouvain. My question is about inclusion. As Madame the Prorector said, well, it is important. It's really a criteria for long-term competitiveness. If we link to what you said about the Draghi report, for instance, where the message is competitiveness. And that competitiveness in terms of research and publications became translated into either putting the money in the short term and what is more competitive, which means bigger universities, high-level publications, and so on, and leaving to the side either the smaller ones or alliances with universities, for instance, from Africa, Latin America, which are less known. So my question is, what is the strategy, especially if we think of the long term in the Coimbra group or within the particular university represented here, and funders, to pay what it costs to be more inclusive, because it implies more work, to integrate those who are behind. And if you do so, how you negotiate with all funders, but also with government or those who support research.
So, do you want me to answer that? That may be the closing remarks. I think that's something, indeed, that's something that I talked about during the break, how much it costs in terms of money, but in terms of time, also in terms of to implement and to integrate all these changes into the evaluation. And of course, including, if I may say so, the inclusiveness, and to be more open and inclusive in the evaluation. But I think that again, the key word for me is really integration, gradual integration in all the procedures and all the processes. It's also paying attention to really if you add something, for example, in in the research project, if you want to have more information about the open science practices, sorry to go back on this, or to the strategy of the researcher, or to a specific aspect, or if you ask the researcher to explain some specific part of their CV, then you need to remove some of the parts of the project, so that sorry, I'm starting to mix languages now. So that the person who submit the project doesn't have more work, but also the evaluator doesn't have more work. That's in order to find some kind of balance, and that's first to how to address this issue of cost. But that's at the level of the university what we can do. After that, I think that what we all talked about sharing practices, but when I say sharing, I really mean meeting people and exchanging in person, so that we can really exchange and adapt maybe in the ideas that we have to other contexts, or to take on these ideas and to adapt ourselves in our context. And I think that this is a long-term process, of course, but that's one of the ways, or some of the ways I see that we can be able to be more inclusive. I don't know if you want to add something. Very brief.
2 sentences. The word competitiveness does not imply more production in terms of publications. It's more about making sure there's more quality in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then these issues that were raised by the chair, I think, are also very relevant. It's about what's really there in quality, and that could be helpful also in these kind of developments. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more to be said, but
yeah,
I will close down.
So I'm afraid that we have to close our panel discussion here. So thank you very much for your participation. Really, I just have a few words, 3 or 4, as a matter of conclusion. But what I retain from all our discussions for this afternoon: be bold, be audacious. Move on, and share your practices. And I think that's really the key ground, the basic ground on which we will be able to move on together. The fact that we are in a system and that we need to address the issues in a systemic context is really important, either at the level of the institution. If I remove something somewhere, I need to have in mind what is the implication of this move within the institution, but also at a European level or in an international level. I think that may be one of the most important things, and also one of the or maybe the raison d'être of the coalition. We've worked a lot on the word research assessment, but it's a coalition. And coalition means that we need to exchange, that we are together to move on all together. I think that would be my final words.
Final words.
Thank you. And I don't know if you want to add something about the taxi or the practical information. Ruben. So.